Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com. So I've got a special interview here today. As many of you know, Hire.com is a sponsor of Simple Programmer. So I want to give a disclaimer here. But this interview is not a paid interview. So we're not doing the interview necessarily to just it's not a paid. I actually want to find out some information from Hire.com, and I know that a lot of you did. So I thought I would ask Hire to say, hey, can you give me some of your engineers that are familiar with your product, and can we talk about, let's just talk about what Hire.com does, how it works, and can we talk about just getting a job, right? How can you be a better candidate? Because I know a lot of you have asked me, they said, oh, I don't know, like how I'm gonna, how can I make it so that I'm more likely to get a job through Hire.com if I go through them and stuff. So anyway, just to give a full disclaimer, like I said, Hire.com is a sponsor of Simple Programmer, but we love Hire.com here at Simple Programmer because they're awesome. So I thought, who better to ask about the current job market for software developers than the people that are innovating in the job search. So that's why I thought this interview would be beneficial to a lot of you. So I've got John and Satya from Hire.com here, and they're going to answer some questions and kind of talk about Hire. So welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time. So well, maybe let's start with maybe just a little bit of an introduction. Maybe if you guys want to introduce yourselves and talk about what you do at Hire, that'd be pretty cool.
Sure, I'll start. So I'm an engineer at Hired. I work on the product side. So I basically am a full stack developer doing Rails development, some JavaScript and HTML, basically adding new features, making the product easier and better to use for our users, and fixing bugs as they appear. That's basically what I do at Hired.
Hey, I'm Satya. I am currently a data engineer at Hired, and I've been here for nearly 2 years. For the first year or so, I was doing pretty much what John described as a full stack developer, which means working with the Ruby on Rails platform. Pretty much all the things that John said, including fixing bugs. And then about less than a year ago, I started as the Hired's data engineer, which means I help to make sure that the data that's in our production app shows up in our analytics database and is usable throughout the company for analytics.
Okay, great. So I think one of the first questions that I'm interested in is just, and I think a lot of my audience is interested in is how the process works. Like what makes Hire different, and what is the kind of flow? I know some people are like, oh, I don't know if I really want to So what is it? If someone goes through and they go through the link, which for those of you listening, you should go to hire.com/simpleprogrammer, obviously to get. But if they go through there, what is the process? What is hire.com?
So the way to look at Hire is sometimes we call it a reverse job site. You could also look at it as a talent marketplace. Mm-hmm. So try to view it as when you sign up for Hired, it's like you're selling something on eBay. The thing you're selling is yourself, your time. And so when you sign up, we're going to ask a whole bunch of questions about you. Just like when you put something on eBay, you have to fill in all the information about the item that you're going to sell. So when you're going on Hired, you're going to fill in basically as if you're applying for a job, but it's not for a specific job. It's the application to get onto the platform. And we ask for a bunch of information up front. And after you submit that, then we take a look to see if there's enough demand for your skill set on our marketplace. And then if that happens to be, if there's demand for your type of skill set, then you'll be approved to go live on the platform. And there'll be some extra details that you'll be able to fill out to expand your resume, so to speak, or expand your profile on the site. And when you feel like you're ready to go live, once you feel like you're ready to start interviewing at companies, you can then hit go, and you can go live on the site. I believe it would be the next Monday. We have currently all the candidates go live on Monday. That way the employers know when they log into their computers on Monday morning, there's a fresh batch of talented programmers ready to be hired. And so at that point, from the candidate side, you basically sit back and you wait for companies to send you interview requests. So companies will look through the list of all the candidates that are live on our platform, and any candidates that seem interesting to them, they can reach out to. They can introduce themselves, tell you about the company, tell you why they're interested in you. They are required to include a potential starting salary.
Really? That's good. Yeah.
It's not binding, so it still remains negotiable. So even if you get an interview request with a certain amount and it's not as much as you had hoped, if the company seems interesting, you should still pursue it, because all of that can be negotiated after the interview, especially if you impress them with the interview. So yeah, it's basically a way of getting quick introductions to companies that want to interview you. And it's just so much easier than applying for a job to finding all these job openings and applying for them. This is like getting an inside track into getting interview. And then on top of that, the big advantage there is that you get all these interview requests around the same time. They're all within the week. And so you can synchronize all of your interviews and start interviewing at the same time, which is really important for when you're trying to figure out what you want to do next. It's tough when you interview at one company one week, another company another week, and it's hard to get everything to line up so that you can actually make a decision. As well as for negotiation purposes, it's good to have basically everything in front of you at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think also, one of the things that appealed to me was the idea that the companies are coming to you with interviews. So and if I understand correctly, any company that comes to you once you're live on the site, they are giving you an interview request. So you're actually going to get an interview. It's not that they're just sending you, because I know, I don't want to knock the competition, but I mean, a while back, and maybe they've changed it, but I was on the Stack Overflow version. I forgot what it was called, and their job site. The problem that I had when I was a developer looking on there is that people would send me queries, and I'm like, well, it's slightly better than me setting out stuff, but it's not passive enough, because I don't want to deal with the back and forth. I want you, if you want to interview me, then that's good. So I think that's to me, that makes a lot of sense. And just the idea that, one of the things that I've always encouraged developers to do on this simple programmer is this idea of marketing yourself, so that you've got people coming to you rather than you reaching out, because there's a lot of overhead, right? And so I like this idea of you just do it once, you get on the platform, and now the request, it's coming to you and it's filtered already, because it's at the interview level where you can actually take action. So you don't have a lot of overhead and waste time. Yeah.
And on top of that, by having the salary amount up front, you know ahead of time, even before you interview, if you're even on the same page, if it's even worth your time to actually go through the interview.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the things that people can do to, I guess this is a slightly different strategy, right? Because if you're applying for jobs, one thing that I always encourage developers, I say, okay, well, look at the job description, right? And tailor your resume specifically to that job, right? Rephrase what they said so that you want to be the perfect match. So they're like, wow, this is awesome. This guy's exactly, it's like he read the job description and modified his resume, because that's what you did, right? Because and make the cover letter, because that's the level of that's going to get you. But when you're looking at something like Hired, where you're filling out more of a generic application, in what kind of tips, what kind of things is going to make a candidate better, more likely to get approved on the platform, and more likely to get the interviews? And I'm assuming those are pretty close to the same thing, because you obviously want good candidates on the platform so that they're going to get interview requests from companies.
Yeah, totally true. So a lot of the same tips that you would give for someone crafting a resume would apply here as well. Of course, what you mentioned, being able to tailor make it for particular employers isn't going to work. But the concept of putting your skills up front, a lot of the people that use the site are looking for particular skill sets. They want to see, do you know React? Do you know Rails? Do you know Python? Like, each company has their own special interest. So it's good to put that up front, because that gives you an edge.
Which, by the way, the skills that they're looking for do tend to vary across markets. In San Francisco, I believe Ruby is very popular. In other markets, .NET might be more popular. And by other markets, I mean Austin. We're still in Austin, right, John?
Was
Yeah.
it? Oh,
Or New York, or
Yeah.
or other places. Yeah, sorry, I meant Arjan. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the skills that are in demand vary across markets, and of course, as a programmer in any given market, you would know what's in demand. So accordingly, as John said, up your skills on the resume. And I believe we still have the talent advocates that will help you polish your profile once you get on the site.
Okay.
John, please continue. Abrams, please continue.
Yeah, we actually do have. So we have someone who's known as a talent advocate that gets assigned to each candidate that gets accepted onto the platform, and they'll help you. Basically, they'll provide personalized advice to getting your profile looking great. And so there's that. And as Satya said, do research on in your local market. Go to local meetups and research the local companies in your area to know what the popular technologies are there. Although, like, by the time you're ready to go on hired, like, you should know these technologies already. Like, so that's more of a strategy towards building your career. But like, once you're ready to go on hired, the best is just to put your skills forward. So like, if you are really into Angular, put Angular as your first skill. Basically, you want to be honest. Is the tip there? Because if a company is, say, looking for an Angular developer and they see Angular on your skills, and then turns out you can't answer any Angular questions in the interview, it's going to be very embarrassing. So put your skills first. We have a big section of the profile called the summary, where it's this free form text area where you can like tell your whole life story and what you're great at. A lot of people spend a lot of time on there, but from what I've heard, don't even get that far into the profile before they send the interview request. So it's just a matter of like, it's almost out of your hands in that you just want to be honest. You want to put in your skills. You want to put in your work history. You want to put in your education history. And at that point, you just hope for the best. Just hope that you've got what people are looking for at that time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I would, I've always advised developers, on a simple programmer, to try and to be specialists, right? And it sounds like that's the, because I think a lot of people would say, oh, and this was what I used to do way back when, and I still argue with developers all the time, and they're like, oh, they check all the boxes. They're like, yeah, I know SQL, and I know Angular, and I know Linux, and I know Windows, and I know Mac, and I can do Word. And so they list all these skills, and yeah, they can do, I mean, if I listed all the programming languages I've ever done, I could probably list 15 programming languages. But if I were applying for a job today and I wanted an Angular job, I would pretty much list like I'd make that, I might list a few other ancillary ones that went along with it, but I wouldn't list the whole thing, because I want someone to say, oh, dang, this guy, he must be an expert in this particular thing. Is that the same kind of thing that would apply on hired?
Yeah, that totally applies on hired. We've seen some people who put in like 30 skills or whatever, and it starts to look like a LinkedIn profile. And you probably don't want to do that, because then it looks like you're just, throwing everything at the wall. It's hard to believe that someone can be an expert in Python and Ruby and C and like hundreds of other things, when a lot of programmers who've been doing it for a lot of years, they have touched on a lot of various technologies, but you don't have to put every technology you've ever worked with in there. I spent years developing C at the start of my career, but I'm not going to put that into my profile if I don't expect or want to work in C in
Yeah.
my
That's
next
right.
job.
If you don't want to work in a language that you know, you probably don't want to put that on your profile at all. On the other hand, putting more things on your profile could help with showing up in search results, right, John? I mean, you're really familiar with the employer-facing side of things. So
Yeah,
you could show up in search results, but let's say I'm searching for an Angular programmer, like John said, and I find John, and he has listed, let's say, Java, .NET, XML, and Angular is somewhere at the end of that list. I'm going to skip over him, even though he showed up in my search. On the other hand, if I see that John's listed Angular first, I would be more prone to look deeper into his profile.
Right.
Yeah. So putting technologies in there that you don't want to work with is a negative signal. Like you don't want to do that because it harms your ability to be matched with employers that you're looking for. Because we have some candidates that go on the platform who don't get a lot of interview requests for whatever reason, and then we have some candidates that get too many. They get 20 or 30. They don't know how to handle it, and so both situations is a matter of having the right skills listed and the right skills put as a priority, as well as just another thing that we can't forget that it's very easy to gloss over is get a good picture of yourself.
Yes.
A lot of people don't even upload a picture, and then we have a team that like just grabs some random stock photo and puts it in for you, and that's going to hurt your ability to get interview requests. So take a nice picture of yourself. Look friendly. It doesn't have to be a professional photo. Just make your face clearly visible,
Right.
and make it look like you care. Like make your profile look like you care about finding a job, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a Barbie girl living in a Barbie world. It's true. I mean, it's a superficial. Like people, like no matter how you slice it, people are going to judge a book by its cover. So, this is one of those things that I recommend all the time. Is like, and one of the tips that I have for developers for that is like when you're getting the family photos taken, just ask the photographer, say, hey, could you do a headshot for me? And then you've got it's a semi-professional photo and it's going to look good, and use that same one every single place so that you've got that branding element. But yeah, that's a really good tip. A lot of people don't realize how important that is. I mean, in 5 seconds we make an instant assessment of a person, and so that photo is really, really important.
Yeah. We actually have a feature on our site on the employer side. So as a candidate, you're not going to encounter this, but we have this feature for employers that they can opt into where they can enable a bias filter. And so when they're browsing through the candidates, it hides their names and their photos.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah, the employees just get to see the candidate's initials and like a generated picture that's just squares.
Oh, okay. I thought for a second there that you're going to tell me about I forget what what is that? There's this wacky branch of science. They're kind of bringing it back now, where they look at the facial features, like how big your forehead is and stuff, right? I forget what it's called. Like
chronology.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say, yeah, we've got that for employers. They can be like, oh, yeah, this guy looks like a criminal, so it will.
Yeah, no, we have the opposite of that.
Yeah. more. We're going more the meritocracy route then, right? Like the.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. That makes sense. But for the ones that are going to look at the photos, obviously it makes sense to have you should you might as well have a good foot in the door. Like you might as well put your best foot forward, I'd say. So.
It's the same tip for if you want people to follow you on Twitter,
Right. Yeah. That's good. So that makes sense. Yeah. With the specialization thing too, I always, it's kind of interesting. I like to use the example of how, if you're convicted of a murder, when you're looking for a lawyer, you don't look for a lawyer that says, oh, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, but I also do tax law and estate planning and divorce law. Okay, maybe he's good, but you want the guy that's like, I can get you to beat a murder rap. That's what I specialize in. And it's the same thing. Like employers are looking for the same thing. They're like, yeah, maybe you're a genius and you can do all this stuff, but if they're looking for an Angular guy and you're an Angular guy, that's makes sense to me. So
yeah,
cool. There was something else I was going to ask you about that you brought up there about the I can't remember what it is, but I'm trying to think what it was. We talked about the picture. The specialization key. Oh yeah, yeah. So with the keyword, so a candidate having too many interviews, to me that it would indicate that they're not being specific enough. And I think a lot of people might think in terms of, and maybe you've got some idea, maybe some data on the offers or what their starting salaries is. But my guess would be, if you're not getting enough offers, if you're not getting enough interview requests, that's one problem. But if you're getting too many, my guess would be your mean starting salary that they offer you would be lower, because you're not matching as specifically. Whereas again, if you took that murder case, right, when O.J. Simpson hires a defense attorney, he's going to be really, really expensive. He's going to pay a lot of money for that person because they're very specialized in what he wants, what the result that he wants. And so I would assume the same thing. Are you seeing that kind of correlation with data?
Yeah. So I don't have the data in front of me, and I haven't looked up that specifically, but I wouldn't expect it to appear so much in the interview request salary amounts. But you did bring up a good point in talking about salary, because there is a feature on our site where, as a candidate, you can specify your preferred salary. And I think that is a big factor in determining how many interview requests you get. So a lot of candidates will set too high of a preferred salary, and a lot of employers will be turned off by it. They'll put in, whatever they're earning now plus 20% or something. They might be happy at their current job, but they just want to see if they can, get a big boost in their career. And so they'll go onto the site and put in a huge preferred salary, and then they don't get very many interview requests. Conversely, if you are like a really good developer with 10 years of experience, and you've worked at like Netflix and Facebook or whatever, and then you put in a really low starting salary, you're going to get a lot of interview requests. So picking the right preferred salary is important as well, and it's a little tricky. Our talent advocates are pretty good to talk to about that sort of thing if you don't know what to set.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense to me. I would think that you'd want to optimize it where you're getting, just the right amount, maybe like 4 to 5 interview requests, where, because 20 is too, because you only need one job. You can only do one job unless you're that, unless you outsource your job, like that one guy that I read about in the news that had this whole job. He had this whole job outsourcing. He was working another job, but you eventually get caught doing that. But but you only need one job. Yeah. So.
To be clear with Hired, though, these are requests to interview. Like you're still able to say no to them, and it's not a big deal at all to say no. That way you're not wasting anyone's time. So yeah, like if you have even like 10 interview requests, you could accept 4 or 5 of them, and you can totally interview at 4 or 5 companies within a 2 or 3 week period, and it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Most companies start the interview process once you accept their interview request. Most companies, I believe, start with the phone screen anyway. So you might as well just schedule all of those in one day, get it over with, and then you've got a bunch of companies filtered out.
Right.
I had another point about that, but I forget what it is. So move on.
That's the one where you go into work and like, I got a really long dentist appointment today.
Well, I can't say anything about that strategy.
Well, okay, and then the other piece of this, I believe that if I have this correct, you also okay, so let's say that I work at Facebook right now, and I go to hire.com and I put in the thing, and then my biggest concern would be that Facebook is on there and then they're looking at it and they're like, oh, this guy's looking for another job. So you do filter it, right? So like if the candidate is not going to, like, they're going to be able to trust you and say, okay, you're not going to you're going to hide this from my current employer, right?
Yes. So that's true. We filter out you from appearing to any employer that you currently work for. So yeah, you specify you work for company X. When company X logs in and looks through all the candidates, they won't see you.
Okay.
That's something we do. At the same time, though, like different employers have like friends, like the word can get around.
Yeah.
That's the same risk as if you applied for a job at another company. Someone at that other company could tell the CEO of your current company. So it's we don't have some kind of guarantee that they won't find out somehow, but they won't find out from us. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. I try to encourage people to live as if everything they do is public, because we're going to that era. In 10
Yeah.
years, we'll be there, right? There'll be cameras everywhere. We'll be. So,
Yes.
yeah. So you should just assume that, especially if you post anything on the internet, right? It's just, you might as well consider that public.
Yeah. Especially as a programmer, like we're very in demand right now
Yeah.
economically. And so like I find it very hard to imagine an employer like just firing someone because you're looking at, for other opportunities. If anything, they're going to use it as a chance to, make you want to stay and like try to make you happier and try to fix your problems. So at the same time, everyone's situation is different, and we will keep you hidden from your current employer if that's what you want to do. But as a tip, as like a career tip, I agree. I totally believe in being transparent and open and talking to your manager. It should, like, if you decide to leave your current job, it shouldn't come as a surprise to your manager. As someone who's made that mistake in the past, I regretted doing that. I just kept my problems to myself, didn't tell my manager about it until I found a job to switch to, and then I told him, and then I regretted it because he felt like he wasn't even given a chance to make things better, and he probably could have.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I guess I might argue that if he doesn't have a good pulse, then you might throw some of the blame there too, because if he's not checking in with you often enough.
But they're not mind readers, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Very easy to put on a brave face and say like, everything's good, boss.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So so then also, I think a lot of people have said to me, they said, "Hey, I didn't get accepted on Hired."
Yeah.
Now, and some obviously by some of the emails I've gotten where they've decided not to use any shift keys at all, or any punctuation. I know why they didn't get on the like it didn't matter where they were at geographically. Like if you can't send me a decent email, okay, that's a pretty good indicator. So those people are beyond help. But geographically, right, that matters a lot, as well as the skills in the particular domain. I know you can't like give out all the data, but just for those people that are like, well, I'm a really good developer and I wrote a really good application, what happened? What could happen that could prevent someone from getting accepted on the platform, assuming that
we have certainly, very certainly, rejected people who are fantastic developers, and we probably should not have rejected them. Like, we make that mistake way too often. We're constantly getting better. We're trying to get better at it. Unfortunately, like when someone fills out a profile, there's not a lot of information there. Like, we don't see your full potential on there, and we're looking into ways to try to test you more technically, with providing more technical tests to prove yourself beyond just what your education and work history is. But generally, that's what it's based on: is your work history, your education history, what skills you're focused on, located, but more importantly than where you're located, it's where you're willing to work and where you're able to work. So, like a lot of the jobs on Hired are in the U.S. and we operate in Canada, UK, France, Australia, and Singapore as well. But a lot of if you're not able to work in any of those locations, you have no chance of getting on, because that's where all of our clients are that are using the platform. So if you get rejected, it could be due to any of those reasons. If your only programming credentials is that you went to a developer boot camp, you may be a fantastic developer, and we actually have developer bootcamp graduates working at Hired, and they're fantastic.
Right.
But that may not be enough to like prove that employers are going to be satisfied with it, because a lot of employers aren't interested in that. So we basically listen to the people using our platform and looking for developers. So if they say you have too many bootcamp graduates, then we'll turn that filter up a bit, and fewer bootcamp grads will get in. and you just got unlucky, perhaps because you're a boot camp grad and you didn't make it through that month, the number of boot camp grads again. So just because you got rejected doesn't mean you're a bad developer. It
Right.
doesn't mean you're not gonna be able to find a job or anything. So like definitely don't give up at that point. And yeah, I would recommend just do more programming. Like the more programming you do, the better developer you get. It'll do like open source development, contribute to projects. If you can prove yourself to us, if you can prove yourself to an employer, you can prove yourself to us. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, that logically makes sense because, right, like this is more of the even though this is a different approach to applying for a job, the strongest candidate here is going to be the one that looks good on paper as far as the academics, as far as the experience, because you're going through the more traditional HR, like the person filtering it. Whereas, the strategy first that I would give someone for a boot camp graduate is, hey, you got to get in there, you got to know people, you got to get in the back door. And so that's the difference. So I guess that's just, just to put it out there that the people that's going to play to their, if your strength is, if you're like, I graduated from MIT and I worked at Facebook and Apple, bam, this is great because it's going to take a lot of the work out of your hands, and you're going to be able to get a bunch of interviews, and that's it. You're going to be excel in the platform. But if you're
the hypothetical profile that you just described would probably shoot to the front of our queue, whatever queue we have. That's a pretty good profile just based on those few things you said.
Right. Okay. And then that's not an indicator that, I mean, you could be a not very good developer and have those credentials, but that's what companies are going to assume is going to be. And that's what, so I guess that's the kind of the front door approach. Whereas, the Russian hacker that is really good, but graduate from a boot camp and can't work in the US, he's filled out an awesome hire.com profile, and he's an awesome developer, but it's just not going to go anywhere because, Facebook isn't going to sponsor an H-1B visa for this guy and him not have any experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, the visa situation here in the U.S. has gotten really dire as of late. It's like almost impossible to get H-1Bs at this point. But it's worth a shot if that's what you want to do. But getting to the point, like of looking good on paper, like it's this concept known as external validation, right? So you're good, like you're working at your craft, you're trying to get better every day as a developer, and then how do you prove it to someone else? How do you prove it to a total stranger, a stranger you haven't even met? And so external validation, basically someone outside of you, someone other than you saying, hey, this guy's good, that goes a long way. And so the traditional form of external validation has been going to school, and going to like the best school, because the better the school you graduate from, the better the validation you have as a developer or as a employee, potential employee. The more capable you are, like the tougher the school you graduated from, in theory, the smarter or more capable you are. But with the great thing about programming these days is there's so many different paths to getting into development. Like you don't have to go to an Ivy League school to do this sort of thing. Some kind of external validation beyond that, like having a robust GitHub profile. So if you don't have the school background, having a robust GitHub profile, a lot of activity on Stack Overflow, that sort of stuff really helps us to demonstrate that you can do what you say you can do.
Now, what about, I totally agree with you as far as these are kind of the things that I recommend for developers. And so if someone applies through Hired, or do they have the ability to put like a link to their blog and something like, because that's
absolutely. Yeah, we have a whole section of the profile devoted to links to Stack Overflow, GitHub, Dribble for the designers out there, your personal blog or whatever other website you want to put in. And of course you can put links in your summary as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So then if you've got, if you can build up that authority, like you said, that external validation, and you've got a really popular programming blog, or you've got a really popular GitHub repo or something like that, then that might counterbalance the lack of, you didn't go to college or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and oh, I guess it's worth asking too because so we briefly touched on the H-1B visa, but if someone is applying like in the simple program audience and they are outside of the U.S. and let's say outside of really, if they're more third world country, like more of a place where, because there's a lot of audience, especially on YouTube, that they're trying to get their start. They want to come and work in the U.S. They're constantly. I know I get a lot of emails. What's the realistic chances, or do they have any chance on hired? Is this not the right thing for them?
It's, to be honest, it's an uphill battle if you don't have the ability to work in one of our active markets. So I can say, as a Canadian myself, working in the U.S., it's a lot easier. There's a special visa for Canadians that have post-secondary education,
Right.
relevant post-secondary education. They can get a special visa under NAFTA, unless Trump gets rid of NAFTA. But Canadians can easily get a work visa to work in the U.S. H-1Bs is basically the catch-all work visa for a tech worker, someone. But even an H-1B requires you to have an advanced degree, so you need to have an education from like an accredited post-secondary school. A developer bootcamp does not qualify for H-1B, and unfortunately, the H-1B system is totally swamped at this point. There's way more demand than there is available supply, but it is a lottery. So your odds of getting the H-1B is just as good as anyone else that applies at this point. The latest I heard, like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an immigration expert, but I heard it's about a 1 in 3 chance of getting it. So even to get to that point, you need to interview at a company, get a job offer, sign the job offer, then they apply for the visa for you. The application has to occur in early April, and then you find out in like June or July that you get it, and then you can only start work in October. And so even if you are one of the lucky ones, you still have to go through that whole process. And the timing is so critical and so tricky that it's just very hard for companies to do at this point.
I can't imagine any San Francisco startup going through that process. Any.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens from that. We'll see if more startups are going to be willing to do remote work and things like that. Right now, there's not a lot of demand for remote work on our platform, but it's definitely something we're looking into and hoping to expand in the future.
Okay. And what about for those employers out there? Because I know that a lot of my audience is actually people who employ software developers. What kind of things, what makes them, what's going to help them to succeed on hired, or the kind of advice would you give them for the current job market on getting people? I know it's hard to get developers today, right? It's like hard to get good developers. They're actually, it's kind of funny because we have this feast or famine. Well, we've got a whole bunch of developers that are like, I can't get a job. I'm a great developer. I know all this stuff. And then we've got all these companies that say, I can't find anyone. And there's this gap because every company wants the best developers. They don't want the
Yeah, I think that mismatch where you have the two sides who claim they can't get what they want. A large part of that is, I would actually put the blame on the interview process, perhaps, because a lot of times an employer's interview process is testing specific things that the developer might not have. Just the test is wrong. The candidate being interviewed might actually be a fantastic developer, but they spend all their time writing JavaScript code and doing jQuery or Angular, and then they get asked to, how to balance a red-black tree.
right.
And it's like totally different and irrelevant. So my recommendation to employers is sign up for Hired. You'll get lots of great candidates available to interview. And then have take a close look at your interview process and try to test the things that you actually want them to do. Have them do exercises that are related to the work to be done. But then there's like the other issue of like, how do you stand out as an employer? So like, how do you get a candidate to accept your interview request? Right. And so for that, I recommend just putting your best foot forward. Like, tell a great story. Talk about how the thing is like different candidates are looking for different things. So since it's the employer reaching out to the candidate, your recommendation from before of like tailor making your CV for particular employers, the reverse applies here. So for the employer, they can read the candidate's profile, they can get a feel for what this candidate is looking for, and then try to address that when you first reach out to them with your interview request. So if this candidate is looking to change the world, tell them how you're changing the world and how the candidate can help be a part of changing the world. If the candidate's looking to improve their Node.js skills, highlight the cool work you're doing with Node.js, that sort of thing. So tailor making is my top recommendation. And reach out to a lot of candidates too. So it's kind of like you want to tailor make it, but you want to reach out to a lot of them. In that a lot of like candidates can't accept all the interview requests that they receive. So it's a bit of a numbers game as well. So anyone that looks interesting, make a reasonable offer to them and hope for the best.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that idea of tailoring it actually on the employer side as well, because I mean, so many developers now are used to LinkedIn spam, right? And I still get LinkedIn spam, and I'm like, look, I run my own company. I'm I'm basically retired. Like, you haven't done any research, because if you just Googled my name, you would not send me a generic, like, especially you wouldn't be like trying to send me a thing to apply for a QA position. What, like a low-level QA position doesn't even make sense. And so it's like an instant delete. And even, but there have been people that have like hit me on LinkedIn and have said, oh, I was checking out your YouTube channel, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I might not even be interested. Like, you might not have done enough research to know that I wouldn't want a job, but I'll talk to you now, and maybe I'll actually refer someone, right? Because you actually care. So I think that's great advice that you gave for employers, I think. So.
And I think it's important too for employers to realize that Hired is very different from LinkedIn. So the biggest differentiator between us and LinkedIn is the fact the candidates who are live on our platform are actively looking for a job right now. And so when you reach out to them, you have a much higher chance that they're going to actually read what you're sending them and respond. So it's worth the extra time to tailor make a message you send to them, compared to LinkedIn, where it's not worth your time to tailor make a message you send to an engineer, because they're probably not even looking for a job. Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's right. The phrase we want to use there is high intent. These candidates are high intent. They are definitely out looking for a job, not just cruising.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and that's a really good argument, I think, for using the platform, is because and they're highly filtered at this point, so it's saving you a lot of time. So that's the thing that really attracted me when you guys first proposed doing sponsorship for simple programming. And said, well, this is great, because this is kind of the kind of thing that I totally recommend people to do, is like, on both sides of it, is how can you automate, how can you get rid of the overhead, right? Because applying for 5,000 jobs, that's a pain in the butt. It's a waste of time. And on the employer side, filtering through, I mean, I hire people all the time, and trying to go through all these resumes and do all these, and it's like, you just need to get a good filter. So by having it on both sides, that makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, when I signed, so I got my job at Hired was using Hired. So I signed up for Hired because as an engineer, it seemed like a more attractive way of doing the job search. And I already went over that earlier as like the pros of it. And then now that I've been working at Hired and get to use the other side of the product where you do the hiring part, it's also a lot more pleasant too. Like I didn't realize it would be a non-zero sum game. It's both sides benefit from this new way of interacting with each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, I think that's about all that I've got questions, and I'm pretty excited. Like I said, I think this is to me, this is the future. This is the way that this should be done, because it's a waste of time with the current way that we're doing job searches and applying for all these jobs and things like that. If we can have these kind of filtered platforms, that makes a lot more sense to me. So thanks for taking the time, you guys, for and for doing what you do.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, I'll talk to you all later. Take care, and take care, John and Satya.
Ciao.